One of the most important routes on a Cisco router is going to be the default route, the Obi-Wan Kenobi route. What do we do with the packet? We don't have a more specific route in the routing table. What do we do? Boom, throw it over there, the default route. Well, when we have a default route that's active on our Cisco router, it's also considered to be the gateway of last resort. Let's take a closer look. So here on our management PC, we'll open up PuTTY, and let's open up consoles to all 4 routers. So here on router 1, let's do a show IP route, press enter, and let's just hit any key except for enter and space to go ahead and pause the output. So here when we do show IP route, below the router codes, we have this statement right here. Gateway of last resort is 10.1.0.99. Think of that as the next hop that this router is going to use when it uses this default route. And the default route is right here. It's a static route on this router. The network is 0000 with a 0 mask. Because it's a static route, here we have the administrative distance. It has a metric of 0, and it says the next hop is 10.1.0.99. Now, in our previous skills regarding OSPF, we discussed and demonstrated in the lab on injecting a default route into OSPF. And that's what R1 is also doing here, is using the command default information followed by originate. And because he does have a static default route, that would go into OSPF, but we also added the keyword in the lab we added the keyword always. Now the benefit of injecting this route, the default route, into OSPF is so that the other OSPF devices in that area can also learn about that default route. In our topology that we've been using throughout our OSPF skills is the topology with R1, R2, R3, and R4. So here in the lab, let's take a peek at those other 3 routers and take a look at their default route information as well that they are learning via OSPF. So we'll make a road trip over to R2. So over here on R2, we'll do a show IP route, press enter, and notice that R2 has a gateway of last resort, and it's going to be using 10.12.0.1. That's an IP address of R1, and R2 learned this via OSPF. And because it learned it via OSPF, here's the administrative distance of OSPF, and here's the metric, or in the case of OSPF, the cost of that route. Also, it has this little asterisk here, and that asterisk indicates it's a candidate default. So we could have multiple potential default routes that are being advertised to this router. And if we did, in the routing table, we'd see a little asterisk next to them. But only the best route, based on the administrative distance and the metric or the cost, would be selected. And in those situations where we have 2 or more routes for the same network, and we have the same administrative distance, and we have the same cost or metric, the router can then start load balancing using multiple paths for that network. So let's go check out R3 as well. So here on R3, we'll do a show IP route. And here's the OSPF learned route. Gateway of last resort is 10.13.0.1. And the last router we're going to check on is R4. So we'll make a road trip over to R4. We'll do a show IP route. Press enter. And R4 is using the next hop of R2 based on that last octet in our lab topology. So I've got a question for you. Right now, this router, router 4, is using the default route with the next hop of 10.24.0.2. It learned it via OSPF, so the default administrative distance is 110 with a cost of 4. If we implemented a default static route, which we've done in a previous skill with static routes, boom, 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 boom. So we did IP route, quad zeros, and dotted decimal, space, and then we followed it by, and instead of saying 10.24.0.2, which is R2's address, maybe we said 10.34.0.3, which is R3's address. If we pressed enter, what is the default administrative distance for a static route that has an IP address for the next hop? Do you remember, based on the previous video? What is the default administrative distance for a static route? And if you're saying, Keith, let's see here, directly connected was 0, static routes are 1, OSPF is 110, and RIP was 120, so yeah, I remember, it's 1. Well, if we did this static route, which has a better administrative distance, this route that it learned via OSPF would be bounced out of the routing table, and it wouldn't show up here, and we'd have the static route instead. In fact, let's test that as a group. So what we'll do is, I'm going to make a note on my next hop there of 10.34.0.3. So let's go ahead and do that right here on R4. So on R4, we'll go into configuration mode. We'll do IP route. We'll put in the quad zeros for the network, the quad zeros for the mask, space, and then for the next hop, we'll use 10 dot, and we talked about 34.0. And I bumped my enter key. So 10.34.0.3, and we really don't need to put in an administrative distance because by default, the administrative distance is going to be 1. which is going to be better than the OSPF learned route. So if we press enter here and we do a do show IP route and press enter, check it out. Here's our static route. It's also a candidate default. It's no longer been learned via OSPF. It's been learned because of the static route command that we just injected on this router, and the next hop is 10.34.0.3. So here's the administrative distance, and its cost or metric is 0. In this video and lab, we identified that when the router has a default route that it can use, it's also going to show up as a gateway of last resort, basically meaning it can use that default route to forward packets when there's not a better match in the routing table. I'll see you in the next video. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.